To start, we invite our first speaker, Mr. Aalok Bhan, Director and Chief Marketing Officer, Max Life Insurance. A leader with long-standing expertise of over 2 decades in financial services and banking, Aalok Bhan leads the marketing function at Max Life as Director and Chief Marketing Officer. In his role, Aalok oversees the company's product, branding and corporate communication strategies towards strengthening customer-oriented product design strategies, brand positioning and marketing, as well as managing all corporate and internal communications. Aalok will be speaking on the topic strategies to influence the customer mindset. Over to you, Aalok.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here to share with you my experiences, our brand's learnings of the very eventful year of 2020. Thankfully, 2020 is behind us and we are well into 2021. It's an important year of learnings for all of us with respect to how to be working along with our customers and our consumers, and the role of marketers and the role of the brand, how it has changed and how it has become that much more important in the new financial year. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm going to share my screen in a minute and then we can start. I hope everybody can see my screen. All right. With that, the topic for the day is really strategies to influence the customer mindset, and more importantly, winning in the new normal. Well, the new normal has been one of the most commonly used terms in FY 2020, and in such a manner that I think a fair number of customers and consumers had heard enough of the new normal. But yes, as a strategy for all of us marketers on the call, it is important to realize how we can influence the customer's mind. And I will share with you our experience in the next few slides. One second. Yeah. So, well, 2020, the year of the global pandemic. Important to understand that this global pandemic was a very different pandemic than the previous pandemics that have ever inflicted upon the face of the earth. This was more of a personal pandemic than a global pandemic, in the sense that it was happening to and is happening to people in our neighborhood. In most of the cases, it had entered our homes as well. So resulted in many, many more anxieties and many, many more differences in reactions and anxieties than any other pandemic that has appeared in our lifetime, at least. So it was more a personal pandemic than a global pandemic. In this time, we as a brand conducted a survey of urban customers to try and understand how they feel about their financial future. The core was how they feel. And we've been doing this survey for the last 3 years. This was the 3rd year in continuity. And we have seen now that whilst the urban customers, their knowledge on life insurance and also their ownership of life insurance has increased significantly, but so has their level of insecurity. So the urban customer felt more anxious, more curious, and more fearful in the emergence of the pandemic year, even though they have increased their ownership. So that's an important item for all of us to understand, that consumers are changing. To further deep dive into this, we realized, and we saw at a very high level, that of course the anxieties of customers went up to such an extent that the feeling that someone in the family might get infected from COVID obviously was a new thing, but was pretty high, and it continues to be high as the second wave is. We are amidst the second wave. The aspect that sustaining your lifestyle and expenses with the current earnings they were becoming more anxious about that, and the fact that will we have sufficient financial security in case the breadwinner was to be affected and was supposed to lose his life, was a big anxiety that we saw in the customers. So the anxieties, fears, and worries have grown. Urban India has grown more anxious. Very interestingly, even on their expenses, even on the way they were making decisions on their financial investments and financial expenses changed. Uh, you saw that the habit to save and to invest increased. So they were ready to put more money towards their future. Their basic expenses obviously went down because you were not able to go out and spend money, and therefore they also reduced their expenses. And same thing happened for luxury expenses, quite a sharp drop from a 14 to a 9%. So we saw that customers became a little bit more cautious, and they became a little bit more wary of spending freely, but also became more conscious of trying to save for the future. Very interestingly, the way we saw this is that the Maslow's need hierarchy pyramid inverted itself. So, roti kapda makan became the important part for consumers to focus on, and therefore the primary needs became core. We were seeing all the migration that we were seeing of various parts of the country's segment of the migrating population that really impacted all consumers in their mind, and they started to hold on to their basic needs and put more focus on primary needs, on job safety, on security, on health, more importantly on primary needs. So we saw an inversion of the Maslow's need hierarchy. But as they say that in a case of adversity, there's always an opportunity, and that's how we as a brand started to see ourselves, to see how we can help our consumers to wade through this journey. We also saw that the most important part was that whilst the consumers were feeling anxious, as a brand, if you wanted to be with your consumers, you had to behave like a friend, which means you had to stay close with them. You had to continue to be connected with them. Consumers also wanted that the brands should help them, should they wanted brands to help them wade through these journeys and help them overcome the anxieties. So, but they also wanted that we should be a trusted source of accurate information. The brands can't say we will wait for the pandemic to end, but we have to participate in this journey with our customers to take them through this journey. Uh, we saw very interestingly, public wanted to 87% of public wanted the brands to not only issue statements but to work along with the government and with the community to help the community come through this crisis. Very importantly, how should brands communicate? Should be helpful, should be talking about general things on everyday life, should also be informing their consumers about how the brand is putting in their efforts to help them and the community to face the situation. And it is not about being like a FIR, talk about only bad things, talk about the ones who announce bad news, but to more importantly, offer positive perspective of what's happening in the community, what's happening in the environment. But watchful that don't exploit coronavirus to promote your brand. You have to stay authentic, you have to stay empathetic, and you have to stay connected with your consumers, whatever being the situation, and you have to help them wade through the crisis. That is what was coming out from our consumers through various studies. So stay authentic and stay empathetic. We saw another study which has just recently come out that overall the consumers' trust in brands started to shake because this was a once a lifetime kind of an event that happened. And in that situation, it is very important that the brand stays connected, keeps talking to its customers and gives them messages how they should be fighting with the current pandemic that they are facing, and the journey continues. So there was a survey done by Kantar on life insurance loyalty survey, and we saw that for the industry of life insurance, pre-pandemic in the early months of FY22, we were seeing, sorry, FY21, we were seeing that the industry was doing well and the loyalty was going up, as you see from 2019, 71 to 72. But when the pandemic got hit and they did a survey post-pandemic or post as in October, November, December, we saw a reasonably significant fall in the loyalty. Also, what was important to understand is that the consumers were willing to change their brand if they had any other options. So that was a impact on the industry per se. And I think if you deep dive that when in crisis, you have two systems of the brain, the mostly the emotional system and the rational system. In times of crisis, the emotional system takes over, which is what we call the system one. And hence, the emotional part of the brain took over. And that is why what I mean by saying the heart became the new brain. And that is an important part for all marketers to understand, all brands to understand that you're appealing to the emotive part of the brain of the consumer and not the rational part. And this was a time of emotion. So you had to be empathetic, you had to be consistent and be authentic in your communication. This is not the time for push. It's a time for creating a pull and trying to not force your message across, but be more humble and more empathetic towards the consumer's environment. So the message for the group over here is that heart became the new brain, and that is what your communication and your brand messaging should be focusing on. And we did some of those things. You've seen a lot of brands do that in this time, and I'm just giving you some examples very quickly. We know the Amul ads about sanitization, about sterilization. We know how well Lifebuoy took on this because it was quite an extension of what their product is all about. Again, very creative from the Asian Paints part, and of course, Maggie, how they maintained their relevance and their communication. Important part is 60% shifted the brand due to innovative and compassionate ways that the brands responded to the virus outbreak. It doesn't mean that it necessarily affected you, but even if the brand was doing things for the community, that was a big reason for consumers to identify themselves with that brand and make a shift. So loyalty went down, but willing to experiment with brands that were more social and that were more attuned to what the community needed took shape. And that's an important part to learn. Therefore, with this backdrop, what did we do? We, as I mean Max Life Insurance. Just to give you a quick context, we are a life insurance, so it's a very emotive category. It's a business that is largely done through face to face, but very importantly, therefore, technically, face to face ended with the pandemic coming on. Instead of now looking at that as a problem, the brand decided to pick that up as an opportunity and say that the best way that we can stay away from the customer is by getting closer to the customer with communications that will help him deal with his anxieties, as in the community we are facing unprecedented times. But the core of communication, the core for the brand, remain to be empathetic, authentic, and transparent. So just taking you into a little bit of detail of what happened with us. Our business, as I said, is a face-to-face business. We moved it from a face-to-face to a home-to-home because now the customers were not coming to our offices and our sellers were also not able to go to our customers face-to-face. Now, that doesn't mean that we will stay away from our customers. So we developed a lot of digital techniques. We went into contactless solicitation through webinars and through one-on-one Zooms. We all know all these technologies have now become part of everybody's daily life. The challenge was that the general rule of communication, which is that customers or consumers get 7% impacted by the tone, by what you say, 38% get impacted by the tone of what you say, and 55% by the body language. Now, the 55% obviously got impacted because there was no face to face happening. And hence, we had to retrain all our agents, all our sellers, 55,000 of them. How do they emote? How do they engage with their customers and consumers over Zoom? That was a big challenge, But I must say that both our sellers and also our prospects in the environment were very willing to learn. For everyone, it was a completely new molecule that they were picking up, and hence they were adept at it and willing to learn. So we didn't see a rejection outright, but we saw consumers willing to come to the table and say, okay, let's listen to what you are saying. Also, because our category is a very relevant category to these times, but still it's a technical category. It needs some technical analysis to be done, and therefore we moved all our tools to remote. Everything became digital. We had created tools on the mobile such that we could share them with our customers and take them through the purchase journey. All this, by the way, happened in a period of 15 days from late March. Most importantly, taking away the fact that life insurance otherwise is a category where lots of papers need to be signed and for which you need physical presence. We moved everything to digital. We moved everything to the electronic platform within weeks, and we were able to accomplish the conversion of the sales through pure digital means with complete physical distancing being maintained. So a lot of DIY happened on our processes and customers became more independent. It wasn't easy, I must say, but with the effort, with both the customer and the seller willing to go take this action, we were able to succeed. That was from the customer side. Again, more importantly, it's from the seller side. And I must tell you that the sellers that I'm talking about right now are also my agent advisors. The average age of the agent advisor would be, say, in the mid 40s. A fair number of our agent advisors are housewives and retired people. So for them to be able to adapt and adopt the digital means was we thought not going to be easy, but I must you know, uh, give a salute to them that they adapted to it like fish in water. So we had one of our big businesses is around recruiting agents. Recruiting agents in the past is done through physical seminars and branches and in events. We moved all of that to webinars, and we saw far more traction in consumers and in recruits wanting to participate in this. And we've actually seen a lifetime growth on our recruitment in the entire year. Not only that, but accomplishing the entire training, accomplishing the entire sales process digitally, sitting out of homes was another big challenge for us, but we managed to do that, and we're very happy to say that we have grown on that side as well. And like sales management, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So all of that moved to digital tools, and yeah, one thing certainly resulted that everybody started to get more exhausted because all these virtual conferences and virtual Zoom calls do result in huge amount of exhaustion. But I think the team manifested itself and has made itself has built a new muscle on how to deal with these situations. At the end of it, building trust is the most important category for a brand, and especially for a brand like Max Life, which deals in a business of life insurance, which is a very emotional business. The biggest moment of truth is if something were to happen to the family, at that point in time, are we able to accomplish giving the family the money that they have bought the policy for? And for Max Life, we are the leaders in the in the claim settlement ratio. 99.22% by value of all the claims raised with us were paid, and that built the huge trust back in the consumers. And we used the core line of Bharosa as core to our narrative, and we keep using that, and it is built our trust of our brand. So what I'm trying to say to everybody is that keep focusing on the core purpose of the brand. Don't go silent as things go by, and we have seen the advantage of that. And I will share with you a couple of more creatives that we used to make them very contextual. We looked at fitness and happiness as a theme in these times to build immunity. Immunity was the new word, so we've used that. We used contextualizing of the purpose of Max Life, which is to build protection for the Indian community. When you look at the creative of when you cover your family, you cover a nation, We've used that and it was appreciated. And of course, the Bharose Ka number where we used influencers and we went to the markets with some of our media campaigns as well. We were clear that if at this point in time we stay quiet, the customers will become quiet when we come back and normal times come back. So therefore, to sum it up, and I hope I have not spent more time than I should have, the 4 or 5 big learnings for us. This was a personal pandemic. Therefore, you had to deal with it in a very different, almost a one-on-one kind of a format. Brand needs to stick to its core purpose. The job of us marketers is to tell a story which is close to the customer and close to the purpose of the brand. For Max Life, one of the values is about care. So our brand will talk about care. And when do you talk about care? When things are not necessarily in a very positive frame. So continue your storytelling and continue being close to the customer. That's the third point. But as a brand, you have to remain authentic, empathetic, and transparent. This is not the time for shortcuts, and it's a time to stay with the customer and be very transparent. And I think one thing that we learned through our communication was that make your communication focusing on the emotions, focusing on the heart, and therefore, heart is the new brain, is my message to everybody over here. What I'll leave you with as the last slide is that there are options that marketeers have. Simplest option is to wait for normalcy to come back. The better option is to help the consumer wade through these rough waters. And that's what we focused on because we did not want to focus on only the new normal. The consumers had heard enough. They wanted to go for a better normal. And therefore, my message to all the marketers over here would be focus on the opportunity, focus on being authentic, and drive the consumers towards the positive side. It's a half glass full versus a half glass empty. All the brands that would focus on half glass full versus half glass empty will thrive and survive this particular pandemic. Therefore, for FY21, continue your journeys, continue the fact that that things haven't finished as yet. We are still seeing a new pandemic coming up. Therefore, do not stop your journeys of being with your customer constantly and helping them wade through their anxieties and their issues. If you stay close with them today in tough times, they will be close to you when you come back. And we have seen that in another survey that we saw for MaxLife as a brand, where we've come out in a Kantar survey on loyalty as the number one brand in the private sector life insurance private sector, having the highest number of truly loyal customers. So that's really my message to all of you. I guess I've rolled it out in time. With that, thank you very much for having me here. It was great, delightful to share my thoughts with the entire group. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alok.